So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Accelerate Conference of the Open House. And for this year, our tagline is Impact, Revelations for Maximizing Impact. Upskill, pardon me, for maximizing. And we all know the times we are right now. The new normal, post-COVID. A lot has happened. A lot of water has gone under the bridge. And more are yet to come. Now, this session, like the brand conversations we had in December, serves not just as a preparation, but as an ongoing way of helping us solve issues that emanate in the workplace. And tonight we have someone who has, over the years, gathered experience in helping people work better, achieve more better in the public and private sector. It's Dr. Kenneth Ikenwa. This is one particular voice in our country, Nigeria, and by extension, Africa and the world, that a lot of issues have come to the trash at his table, and he has not failed to give us that clear picture of what it is, no matter who's up. So, Dr. Kenneth Ikenwa is a lecturer at UNILAG. That's what I was going to say for now. So I will allow him to take up the stage and then do what he knows. You're welcome, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I just lost Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. My tablet was just crashed and fell down. All right. Well, not to worry. We'll stay fans now. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is very simple, Kenneth Ikenwa, lecturer at the University of Lagos, management consultant, Committee on African, a believer in this called Nigeria, and a believer in future Nigeria. And I've been given a task this evening, which will take, according to the convener, for 5 minutes. But our pre-conference conversation and discussion and what I think I have to upload definitely not and cannot be fitted into hours. But let's make the best of the time we have and enjoy ourselves. So this evening I'll be speaking on new workplace reality check. New workplace reality check. Still trying to get the proper adjustment, but still I hope that's okay. And new workplace. All right.
Yeah.
New workplace reality check. We woke up on the 28th March 2020, or should we say the 20th of January 2020, and the world was beginning to become agog with a new infirmity, with a new disease, with a new dimension to COVID virus strains, which was tagged COVID-19, that was to change the size of the world, the scale of the world, the structure of the world, and the size of businesses, the scale of businesses, and the structure of businesses. And all of this having interrelated implications and relationships one with another, key of which is the strategy for businesses. So it didn't matter at what point or at what level you were on your life cycle as a firm. It didn't matter the size of the firm. It didn't matter the strategy of the firm. It didn't matter the structure of the firm. It didn't matter the number of staff you had, the shared values. Every firm, irrespective of size, irrespective of strategy, irrespective of structure, irrespective of style of leadership or style of management, was confronted with what even the American president was told 2 days ago, that will become the new normal. Whilst we may want to spiritualize or psycho-spiritualize how Africa has been spared the negative consequences of the offload of COVID-19 into the global social space and the global business landscape, we cannot run away from the reality of the changes that COVID-19 definitely would impose, as it were, forcefully or deliberately, or as a matter of emergence, impose on the Nigerian business landscape, on the Nigerian social landscape, and on our social structure and milieu and environment, as it were. So, what do we do as a firm? The first thing for me is to start by saying these are very interesting times. And then the second thing is to realize what is interesting about the times. The major interesting thing about the times is that there is now a new definition of work. There is now a new definition of how the structures of organizations should be. There is now a new definition of what the center point of a firm's strategy should be. But what we will try to do, given the paucity of time in this conference from my end, is to see how we can identify some of the issues that we have to deal with across the public sector, across the private sector, and most importantly, however, the most neglected, the informal sector. But I do not think that time will permit me to actually, take a look at the informal sector and do decisive justice to the informal sector. So, my goal for this conversation will be to identify what the major challenges will be. That's my number one goal, to propose identify what the major challenges will be, to propose what responses from the supply side perspective. So organizations, individuals, employees, entrepreneurs, administrators, managers, leaders should realize that the platform of our analysis and conversation is from two sides. There is the demand side and there is the supply side. So on the demand side or on the supply side, you have you and I that are labor, you and I that have the human and intellectual capital that will decide what our individual responses to COVID and the new COVID era and the new workplace, post-COVID-19 workplace environment will be like. How do I respond to it? Do I respond proactively or do I respond reactively? I hope that at the end of my conversation tonight, I should be able to help us arrive at the best possible positions to take as far as responding to COVID-19 is concerned. So, COVID-19 workplace. The COVID-19 workplace. There is the new reality we have to face about the fact that this workplace has created challenges that we would have to live with, challenges that we'll have to work around, challenges that we'll have to strategize around. For what purpose? To ensure that our product performance, to ensure that our service offerings, to ensure that the various performance metrics of the organization remain consistent, even in this era of a high degree of unpredictability. And so when you begin to talk of these changes, what you would want to ask me, if you consider that, okay, this is a management expert, this is a strategy expert, how do we find solutions? What you want to ask me is to recommend solutions to the challenges. But I'm afraid I'll have to bust your bubble, and I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you tonight. I would not be recommending per se solutions, because I really think that what we should be looking for in the new workplace, with the new challenges that are characteristic of the post-COVID-19 work environment, are not going to be solutions. What we should be looking for, what we should be designing, what we should be developing, what we should be deploying are new paradigms, workplace paradigms, business paradigms, technological paradigms, new human resource paradigms that will help to optimize the performance, the productivity, that will help to optimize the performance, the productivity, okay, of individuals that work in organizations, of groups, of teams, of even the managers themselves, and of the firm as a collective. So, the scientist Charles Darwin, whom I'm not too much of a fan of, but we cannot overlook the reality of his theory in application to business, the theory of evolution, says that, look, it is not the most intelligent of species that survive in a competitive environment. It is the species, or it's the species that are the quickest to respond to change, because change is the major constant you will find in the business environment, you will find in the physical environment, you will find in the social environment. So the best organizations are those who can now go back to the drawing board and restructure, redesign the firms, realign their firms for the purpose of responding to the new normal, which is the post-COVID-19 or post-pandemic new workplace reality. I will take us through what some of the characteristics, some of the outcomes of these new workplace realities are, but not that quickly, not that soon. Now, having identified that we should be focusing on new workplace paradigms, these workplace paradigms must be focused on adaptation. We can't throw away the fact that COVID is here. We can't throw away the fact that we lost some colleagues. We can't throw away the two biggest products of COVID in the world today, across cultural, across diversified, domains, hemispheres, as it were. And what are those two pillars of COVID? There is the fear of COVID, and there is the obsession with COVID. We can even add number 3. There is the skepticism about COVID. There's so many conspiracy theories about COVID. Some people believe, oh, it's not real. Some believe it doesn't kill Africans. Some believe I don't need to wear a mask. Some, like we could see with the latest imbroglio that happened in Australia with the world #1 tennis player, who says, look, I'm a COVID skeptic. I'm a vaccine skeptic. I don't want to take any vaccination. I don't know what's in it, but I feel I'm well enough, even though I contracted COVID before, and I want to play. So these are issues. We're having different state governors in Nigeria, for instance, who are placing emphasis and embargoes on those who have not taken the COVID vaccine. And yet again, at the resumption of work this year, the coverage of some offices in the federal secretariat in Abuja showed that a good number of workers, I watched it, did not come to the workplace with the COVID protocols, with the non-pharmaceutical COVID protocols that were required of them. So these are the things that we have to cope with. But most importantly, the paradigms that I hope to share with us this evening are paradigms that simply are not cast in stone, but are cast on the need and the emphasis for us to focus on adaptation. Now, if we are to focus on adaptation, adaptation has a dichotomy to it, which is one, the need to develop adaptive capabilities as firms, as individuals, as managers, as team leads. And secondly, the need for us to now shift our paradigm of evaluating the performance of our firms away from financial parameters and metrics, away from strategic parameters and metrics, to include adaptive performance parameters, indices, and metrics. How well has the organization adapted? How well have individuals adapted in the new workplace that is characterized by the fear of COVID-19 and by the obsession with COVID-19 and by the skepticism about COVID-19? These are three defining variables that will predict the performance of firms at least between 2022 and 2025, until we find a permanent cure or we find a permanent mitigant to the COVID-19 evolving strands. Today is Omicron, yesterday is Delta. We don't know what else we're going to have next. Number three, we need to realize that adaptive responses through these adaptive capabilities are the things that will determine our adaptive performance. So let's take note of that. We have the financial performance metrics. We have the non-financial performance metrics. We look at our ROI. We look at our ROCE. We look at our returns on sales. Those are good. But now organizations should now shift. That's my proposition. Proposition number one. Shift to include investigating the adaptive performance of the firm over a time period, given the post-pandemic new normal that we find ourselves in. All right, so we move on. COVID-19 and change. What COVID-19 has done is that it has brought about change in different sectors. And how do you handle that change before we start talking of solutions? So I have a model. I wish I could share a PowerPoint on this, but let's just have a discussion. Okay, so the first thing you find in the model is the post-COVID-19 workplace. Second thing you find is the new workplace challenges. The third thing you find that these challenges have created is change. And the last thing we're looking for is solution. So I'm reversing the discussion along the line of that model. I've looked at the solutions and I've said there are no solutions. What we need is a paradigm shift, and the paradigm shift should be anchored on developing adaptive capabilities and expanding our performance evaluation criteria away from financials, away from the strategic parameters and indices, to include, most importantly, adaptive parameters and indices. So we move to change. If change is the only constant, why and how or for what purpose do we find people rejecting change? Now, a management scholar by the name, a management consultant by the name John Hagel in 1983 shared something about change that continues, to hold sway over time. And he said that, look, people refuse or reject or avoid change simply because change is threatening, change is difficult, change is risky, and change is often illusionary. So, but unfortunately for us, COVID-19 has forced and enforced change in the global social, in the global business, and in the global work competitive landscapes. And so, we can't run away from it. We can't deny it. We can't enthrone our individual biases and skepticisms and conspiracies around it. The best we can begin to position ourselves for is how best to respond to it by adapting to the situation that is practically on ground now. Now, in dealing with change, there are two extremes. What are these two extremes? Change creates an environment that for firms, that for individuals, that for organizations, either in the public, mostly in the private, or in the highly concentrated informal sector, an environment that is on the left or on the right hand, wherever or however you're looking at it from, is highly unpredictable. And on the other hand, is highly predictable. So the change that we have to deal with as far as COVID-19 is concerned is has come to enthrone an environment that may be highly predictable. Okay, so we put this and this together and we can get and motivate our employees to do their best and come out productive. But that can't be the case. Or it is highly unpredictable. And where it is highly unpredictable, we can begin to come to terms with the fact that that unpredictable fact about change, I have to adjust this, pardon me. That unpredictable fact about change creates complexity in the environment, number one. It creates chaos in the environment, number two. And it brings about contradictions that firms have to deal with. Now, I said the basis of my conversation tonight anchors on two directions, on two platforms of analysis: the demand side of analysis and the supply side of analysis. So the demand side has to deal with the managers and the entrepreneurs and the leaders at work and those at the C-suite that want to employ people like myself and yourself and a good number of people that are listening. Now, then the demand side or the supply side has to do with people like me that are available to work, available for paid employment, that may be even working right now, but may not be working in the best deserved, conditions of employment. So you have those of us that are working, those of us that are employed, and those of us that are underemployed. Whatever the case is, what we see is that we are on the demand side of the platform, and those that are wanting our intellectual capital and human capital, to be used as key resources in the organization, they are on the supply or the demand side of the analysis of the platform. I want to focus today on the demand side and also a little bit on the supply side. So those on the demand side, what I've actually anticipated should not happen has happened. So it has to do with the supply of electricity and and the demand of electricity. I was going to think that I should put on my self-generating electricity plan for this session, but I was so confident and I had so much faith, as we all Nigerians do, that the electricity distributors will not strike.
There's no problem.
So I don't know if
what we'll do is we can come back after you're able to rectify that.
Okay, so I'll do that in 3 minutes.
Okay, problem. Great. Now, as it is, I really believe Mr. Dr. Ikenwa has done quite well with this topic, giving us the reality there, because that's what his job is, and he's sticking to that. He has made it known to us that he's going to be giving us what is on the surface, what's happening, and also a little dive into the deep of what should be done. Solutions, but not necessarily solutions, but instead of solutions, paradigms that can be adapted to in the new normal. While we wait for him to come back online, we should also wrap our minds around the fact that a new normal is here today. Aside the COVID task that we always have, and the fact that the government is not doing what they're supposed to do, I think we owe ourselves much more than all the complaints we have here and there. I think we owe the workplace more. We owe the marketplace more. And that's what this session stands for. tonight. So shortly, we'll also be looking at bringing in our other guest for tonight, who will be telling us how to reimagine our images for the times we are in. Reimagining images, and is in the person of Uka Francis, is an expert in human resource, a skills consultant, and over the years he has excelled in what he does, known, yes, all over Nigeria as the number one skills consultant. That's not an exaggeration, because I think very few guys go with a gusto that Uka Francis has demonstrated. While we wait, okay, sir, you have the floor, right? Go on.
Okay, I
Welcome
want
back, sir.
to. Yeah, thank you. I want to
Sorry
apologize.
about. No, we
I need to
understand.
apologize of of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there
It kind of
gradually. All
reminds
right.
us of the things we need to do. It's part of the paradigm shift as well. So whoever is in this session, whoever watches us now, should know that we are not streaming from Mars. We are streaming from Nigeria. So, and our topics are solution based. Yes, so we look at the problems, but the problems only motivate us. They incentivize us to do more. So you have the floor. Go on.
Thank you very much,
Welcome.
Basil. Thank you. So I was talking about what change does. When you're dealing with change in an environment that is quite predictable, an environment that is quite accommodating, an environment that gives access to resources, such an environment becomes very simple environment, a very stable environment, and it's to an extent very static. So even when issues like COVID-19 come, it creates a burst of change, but it doesn't really disrupt any formidable existing structure. And it's so easy to adapt in such environment. That's why you could find countries like Australia, you could find countries like New Zealand, you could find a few countries, even in Africa, who seemed as though they didn't need to be perturbed about the imposition of COVID-19 and associated issues, but we're able to adapt easily. On the other end, you have change that creates and that thrives, that emerges in an environment that is highly unpredictable. And such unpredictability creates a high degree of complexity. It creates a high degree of chaos. You find chaos everywhere. It creates a high degree of contradiction. And in some, developing country context, that change even begins to create a high degree of corruption, as it were. That's all within the context of the discussion, but it's also a variable that we have to start looking at if we have to have the paradigm shift that would particularly be initiated in the public sector and become a catalyst for pushing Nigeria to the next frontier of economic growth and economic development. Now, this alliteration of C's, change, complexity, chaos, contradictions, and corruption, what do they create? In a society like ours that is very unpredictable. Unpredictable in the sense that it doesn't give you the access to the kind of resources you need, and where this has happened, begin to find a lot of people throwing banters, a lot of people that are not intellectually sanguine enough, to give us representation of facts, begin to give us representation of facts. And all of this have a negative multiplier effect and have spillovers on the workplace environment and have spillovers on the productivity of labor at the national level as a whole. What do these alterations create? They create an environment of high volatility. They exacerbate uncertainty in the environment. They make the environment very risky one to invest in. They make it hard for people to take employment-related decisions that maximize the output of their intellectual and their human capital, as it were. The spike ambiguity becomes a very ambiguous environment. You see a lot of things happening, and yet nothing is happening. You see a lot of resources, are devoted. A lot is devoted to training. A lot is devoted to manpower development. A lot is devoted to the development of infrastructure, and yet nothing is happening. I was hearing, and I was amazed to hear that in the advent of COVID, this is the public-related information, that the government gave about 595 million naira each to different federal government related teaching hospitals, related medical centers, for the purpose of acquiring equipment that will help them cope with the surge in COVID cases. Now, to what extent has accountability, what extent has there be a transparency, accountability, a full disclosure with respect to what those monies or how those monies have been spent? And that's why I said the change that we see in unpredictable environment spikes not just complexity, spikes not just chaos and contradictions, but also spikes a lot of corruption. And this exacerbates the volatility in the human resource space, in the strategic management space, in the financial management space, and in other spaces that are related with the business landscape and the competitive landscape, as it were. So we move away from that, and we want to see COVID-19, and we're saying, yes, it has brought about forceful change. It has brought about emergent change. It has brought about incremental change. And the first proposition here is that the best way to respond to the new workplace challenges, new workplace realities that are spiked by COVID, that are caused by COVID, that are been catalyzed as a result of COVID, is to have a proactive adaptation posture towards these changes. All right, looking at COVID-19 and the bigger picture, what has COVID-19 done, going by the fact that this is the new normal? All over the world, we could see that COVID-19 brought about what we call the Great Reset. It was a great reset of the entire world. For the first time in the history of the new era, in the history of the modern era, in the history of the BCE era, as it were, the entire nations of the world were under a lockdown, a global lockdown. In 2008, what we understood that was a global, denominator across the world was a global meltdown, which had to do with a recession of some sort. So, away from a recession, COVID-19 brought about a global reset occasioned by the major characteristic of all nations shutting down. So while some nations were on lockdown, some other nations were on shutdown. While some sectors in different economies across different countries in the world were on lockdown, some were on shutdown. Some practically could not function.
Sir, can I ask you a question there?
Yeah, please. It's supposed to be an interactive session, so you're free.
Can we distinguish between shutdown and lockdown?
All right. That's a very. I think you'll make a good lecturer. So maybe I should switch position. That's a very good and interesting question. A lockdown is different from a shutdown in the sense that even when there is a lockdown, there is some little degree of work, of transactions, of interactions that is permitted within a given space. At the family level, at the sectoral level, at the competitive level, at least you could see that, okay, they said some essential workers can actually go to work. Some sectors like the food and beverages sector, they were under lockdown, okay? So you had bakers who were permitted to still, bake bread. Market women were permitted to go to market. Special markets in Lagos State, for instance, were created. All of these sectors were under lockdown. So there was some degree of slight, ease of mobility, of movement, of transactions here and there. But when there is a shutdown, nothing happens. Nothing is happening. Everything is happening. You can't buy, you can't sell, you can't move, you can't leave your house. You can't even to the point of possibly access the internet, because those that are working at the backbone infrastructure of the internet possibly may not even be allowed to go to work. So some sectors, like I said in the seminar recently, I think last year, some sectors in Nigeria, for instance, experienced between this COVID-19 advent, experienced recession, and some experienced depression. So we will liken the difference between a lockdown and a shutdown to a recession and a depression. So which is more dangerous? A depression is more dangerous. And I think, in my personal opinion, that Nigeria has been in a depression for a very long time, albeit some sectors at least are working. So I would still insist that some sectors and some countries were on lockdown. And while some countries were on lockdown, some sectors were also on lockdown, and some sectors in those economies were on shutdown. For example, the Nigerian higher educational sector was on a shutdown because at that point in time, the academic staff union also decided to go to work. But it wasn't a total shutdown because that sector, by the privilege of act of law, now has now exists in a dichotomy. So while some private universities were able to function, the public universities were under complete shutdown. But even the private universities who were functioning slightly, averagely, at a low variance, were also under a partial lockdown or a partial shutdown. And that brought about the shift from delivering physical lectures one-on-one to delivering lectures on a remote level through online platforms. And they sent me some of them. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that takes us to my next question now. The remote workplace. There's this thing about remote, those days when pre-COVID, when we hear that sound remote, we feel like, oh, it's someone somewhere, like in your sector, in the educational sector, where you have to deliver lectures via radio to the areas where that are cut off from the regular urban centers. These are rural areas that cannot be accessible by road, so we have to get to them using radio. So the current state of things now in the new normal, are we still going to rely on that because of the lack of infrastructure as it is now in our country? For the regular entrepreneur,
when you do a thorough evaluation of the state of our technological advancement as a country, you will find out that two variables are still very, very preponderant with respect to the Nigerian economy and with respect to Nigerian social context. What are these two variables? They are one, technological backwardness, and there are two, the second one is technological dualism. Now, technological backwardness, let me not speak too down of the progress we have made, technologically speaking. I would just want to measure that with, very simply, one, the internet penetration rate in Nigeria. I mean, up till up till the COVID era, the internet penetration rate in Nigeria was just 50%, which meant that 50% of Nigerians, 100 million Nigerians, only had access to the internet. Now, of that 50%, come back to another economic variable, poverty or the multi-poverty, the multidimensional poverty index. About 63% to 70% of Nigerians are living under $2 a day. So you bring it to the demand and supply cost. How many people will actually be in a position to demand internet by the way of purchasing internet services? That is going too far. How many people in Nigeria, given the poverty rate, will be able to actually afford to buy tablets, to buy smartphones that are workable with internet capabilities for the purpose of value in terms of delivery of educational products? So when you look at the technological backwardness, or for better words of expression, the technological readiness of Nigeria, I think that is one major aspect of the Nigerian social context that COVID exposed. But I also think that Nigeria has done well in adapting and responding proactively to that problem of technological readiness and technological backwardness. So we are still in a very, very dualistic technological environment where some people have access on, I would say, a Pareto sharing basis, access to sophisticated and modern technology, and where more people than the sum have no access to modern and sophisticated technological facilities for the purpose of learning in Nigeria. And these are three issues the government should be looking at, should be collaborating with the private sector so that everybody can be carried along and we can actually turn around, right, the negative spillovers of COVID-19 and make the best outcome. So I think COVID-19 created a platform for us to really sit down and do a lot of analysis and not paralysis, okay, and come out with ideas on how we can actually enable our citizens, enable those in those remote areas, how we can take the internet, just like a good number of technology firms now are taking the internet, are taking banking to rural areas. We need more encouragement of education technology related firms to take learning, to take teaching, to take new curriculum, new robust curriculums for those in rural areas where this technology cannot actually get to. And that will be dependent on the infrastructure and the government on ground.
Yeah, I will take you on EdTech later on this show. So let me ask you to drive us to the end, to the area of those adaptive strategies that you propose for tonight.
Okay, so before we get there, I still have a few things I need to share. Okay?
Okay.
So before you took the mic from me, and I hope you're giving it back to me now, I was on the resultant effects of COVID-19. One, we had the global reset that affected the entire world. Then in the United States of America, we have had and will continue to have what is referred to as the Great Resignation. So we've dealt with the Great Reset, and we're still dealing with that. In America, we're dealing with the Great Resignation. Globally, again, we're dealing with great restructuring. There's a lot of restructuring going on everywhere. It's not about cutting down costs. It's not about sacking staff. It's just about realizing that, okay, for instance, we can be flexible. We can operate flexible firms. We can operate delayed firms. We can operate as a virtual organization. And you could see that even before the advent of the pandemic, firms were already going virtual. You had firms in the fast consumer moving goods sectors that had become virtual firms. They didn't have offices. They didn't have any brick and mortar structure. All you need to do is go online, book for your product, and they have it delivered to you. So these are changes that are now being brought into the educational sector, brought into the banking sector, brought even into the medical sector. And we're not having telemedicine, we're having med tech, we're having health tech, we're having fintech, and these things are just bringing about on a daily basis incremental global restructuring of sectors that were hitherto moribund or that were hitherto subject to inertia. Excuse me. Let's bring it down home to Nigeria and Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. What are we expecting to have? What should we be preparing to cope and deal with? What should we be developing adaptive capabilities to actually deal with? I call that the Great Recline. I won't want to say the Great Decline so that we can have the alliteration of the reset, the resignation, the restructuring, and the Great Recline. What is the Great Recline? And how does it affect the public sector in Nigeria? How does it affect the private sector in Nigeria? And most importantly, how does it affect a neglected sector, the informal sector in Nigeria? The Great Recline is actually going to be experienced from the supply side of labor, from the supply side of human and intellectual capital. And what does it mean? It means that individual staff, male, female, because of the fear of COVID, because of the obsession with COVID, because of the skepticism with COVID, because of the restructuring that has been brought about by COVID, because of the great reset that COVID has spiked into different organizations, irrespective of their size or their scale of operations, they will recline and take the back seat, either consciously or unconsciously. That recline will occur. And when it occurs, what happens? It has implications for productivity, it has implications for performance, it has implications for profitability of firms, as it were. So the challenge is, how will firms, how will individuals on the supply side and those on the demand side, the managers and the leaders and entrepreneurs, how should they position themselves to deal with the coming Great Recline in Nigeria? Let's take a few examples. The COVID-19 protocol says, if you are feeling unwell, stay at home. Or if you are feeling unwell, go for a test. So a few times that I personally have felt unwell, that I personally just developed an emergency cough or emergency cold, the first thing that came to my mind, and this is now talking about the obsession with COVID, was, I hope I don't have COVID. And then the second thing that comes to your mind is that you don't want to go to work just in case you have contracted COVID to go and infect other people. And then the third thing that comes to your mind is to try and go and get a test. The fourth thing that comes to your mind is to try and not go and get a test. And all of this put together leads to reclination, the Great Reclination. So you begin to recline rather than move forward. Your productivity begins to decline. Your accessibility begins to decline. I'm not feeling fine. And the other person, possibly on the demand side, recognizes that this is the COVID era. Okay, please stay at home or go for a checkup. And the productivity for that day, the profitability for that day, the performance for that day, the output for that day at work is decimated because of the Great Recline.
So can we say the Great Recline begins with more of a psychological effect?
I think I want to begin to assume that Basil, our host and convener, is a prophet with biblical insights, because I think you had an insight into my PowerPoint because I know I didn't send that to you, but that I was going to come to, because this Great Recline has implications on what I call CAP, and which I'm going to come to that. But before we look at that, let's look at the workplace reality that COVID-19 is expected to affect and impact. Workplace reality, new workplace reality. In what areas will COVID-19 and this Great Recline that I'm talking about, that I've exposed and espoused to the world now, the first one to talk about it, at least using that concept, and I'm sure you heard that when we first had our first conversation, all right, prior to this conference, is that it will have impact on communication at work. Number one. Number two, it will have an impact on how work is being coordinated and on how workers are being coordinated. So we have the remote work environment, we have the virtual organization, we have the flexible organization. Okay, if you want to work at home, work at home. Okay, since the work can be done at home, why come to work? Work at home to keep yourself safe and keep others safe. So the real problem now for the HR practitioners and human practitioners and the managers at the CCU, how do you coordinate all of this work? Now you tell me to come to work, I can't socially, interact with individuals. I am putting on the mask. Everybody's keeping a meter or two away from themselves. That begins to affect communication at work. The fact that we have flexible working times and working schedules begins to affect the work. The fact that the slightest thing that I feel, depending on what scale I'm measuring my feelings on, whether I'm coming from the fear of COVID perspective, or whether I'm coming from the obsession with COVID perspective, or whether I'm coming from the skepticism about COVID-19 perspective, that begins to affect negatively my confidence as an individual and the confidence of my colleagues that I work with. So for every day I do not show up at work, they begin to lose confidence in my productivity and my output as an individual. So it's a two-way thing. Number three, it begins to affect the commitment of people to work. There's something we call employee commitment or organizational commitment. It begins to affect how committed, how do you now as a manager, how do you as an entrepreneur, how do you as a C-suite manager begin to motivate and incentivize staff to heighten their commitment to the organization? Because the truth is, there is this fear of COVID-19, there is this obsession of COVID-19, and there are these rules and protocols that makes it impossible for COVID to create the kind of organization, or the kind of atmosphere, or the kind of organizational climate that you were used to working in. And honestly, COVID-19 and the great effect, the culture of firms, the organizational culture, the work culture in different organizations. So I've been on the questioning end, Basil. I will want to ask you a question, which actually now proves that I'm actually a teacher or a lecturer at least. out of this five areas that COVID-19 actually, okay, you got. So number one is communication.
Okay.
Number two is coordination of work. Number three is confidence of employees and managers in work outputs. Number four is commitment of employees to the organization. And number five is culture. So if you were in my examination class and I asked you, of these five, which do you think COVID-19 and the Great Recline, which of these five do you think COVID-19 will have the most negative multiplier effect and impact, spillover effect and impact on? Which of these five?
Okay. Now, I think it will have more impact on the work culture, because the previous four you mentioned on productivity, communications, commitment, and coordination all have trappings of the culture of a particular workplace. It refers to. So if I'm not able to communicate with you very well with the mask on my face, the way I behave, the way I speak, you have to relate with the culture, which is the basic definition is the way and manner set of people live. So I guess we just lost our guest. Okay. So I hope you got my answer.
Yeah, I got your answer. I got the answer, and I'm impressed by that answer because you, like I said, you seem to be a prophet with some biblical insights and of biblical proportion, as it were? The answer for me and from my end is actually culture. Culture at work will be the most impacted. Culture at work definitely is the most impacted variable that the Great Recline and that COVID-19 definitely will be having an impact on, all right, as we proceed into the year 2022. The work culture changes, and where the culture changes, it affects every other thing. I mean, the way we used to work is not going to be the way we used to work because we have new workplace realities that we have to put in check and that have to check us, as it were, with respect to how we go about our work. Now, before coming back to your question, how we can develop these adaptive capabilities, I want to visit a pandemic or two pandemics that have actually happened before the COVID-19 pandemic. What are these two pandemics? The first pandemic before COVID-19 was the overworking pandemic. The overworking pandemic. So you found out that COVID-19, for some people coming from the supply side of the work economics, was a blessing in disguise, apart from the fact that some people had to lose their jobs, and some people had to take pay cuts for months, and are still on pay cuts for months, on take-home pays that cannot take them home. Okay? But for a group of people, given the Pareto divide, we found out that COVID-19 was a blessing. So the idea of overworking was cut off because that was beginning to become a major pandemic that you find before the actual pandemic happening in workplace settings. People overworking and the resultant effect of that becoming people being burnt out. So should we say COVID-19 is a blessing because it has helped people to deal with the problems of being burnt out? It couldn't possibly be a blessing because people have to come to the second variable that has to be dealt with when dealing with the Great Recline and the new workplace realities as imposed, generated by COVID, which is the fact that people are affected psychologically simply because they are not used to working in the culture of the new normal that has been imposed on them. As far back as 1939, scientists like Elton Mayo carried out research to find out what actually helps to spike the productivity of individuals at work. And he discovered that, look, when you put people to work alone, the productivity is low. But when you put them to work in groups, when they can be in groups where they have informal relations, where they can, oh boy, I was yesterday, how's the family, thank God it's Friday. They can have these informal conversations. Man, did you watch the Barca Chelsea match? Up Barca, up Chelsea. Thank you. You know, these are informal things that keep the workplace going, keep the workplace, devoid of soldiering.
The
workplace oil.
Yeah, human beings are social beings. We are social beings.
We're social beings. So you can't impose those things and expect there to be maximum productivity from individuals. So these are some of the challenges of, that's why I said our discussion, our conversation is focused more from the demand side of the axis. Because it is the HR managers, it is the C-suite managers, it is those of us that supervise subordinates at work that have to deal with these issues of culture and commitment, and now the psychology that goes with work, workplace psychology. And so, if before COVID, the pandemic before the COVID pandemic was overworking, so what we're going to see as the pandemic after the major pandemic will be underworking.
Wow.
Underperformance is the next pandemic that we would have to deal with. People are not going to resign, don't have that culture in Nigeria. People don't have, as it were, people don't have any unemployment benefits that they fall back on. Nigerians don't really see that it's struggling with the real inflation figures of between 17 and 25%, in an economy with exchange rate volatility, an economy that singularly depends on almost 90% of the things we consume, for people to stand up and say, oh, I want to resign. So they will continue to work in these informal settings, in these flexible settings, in these virtual settings, in these COVID protocolized settings, with forces and factors coming together, pulling together, catalyzing together to bring about a pandemic that we'll have to deal with, especially in the private sector, and that is already existing in the public sector, okay? Especially now in the private sector, the pandemic of underworking, and the resultant effect will be underperformance. So the challenge for managers is how does reconcile this eventuality. It will eventually happen. And don't forget, we're also dealing with great migration of labor, skillful labor out of Nigeria. A good number of Nigerians are bent on leaving this country. The rate at which the United Kingdom gave young Nigerians, both the qualified and the unqualified, visa to come and study in their institutions, whether they are A-rated institutions or B-rated institutions or Z-rated institutions. All you need to do was pay half of your school fees, have evidence of being able to take care of yourself. The rate at which Nigerians have left and continue to leave, the rate at which Nigerians are being exploited to write international exams, to migrate to countries in the West. I don't want to castigate any country now. It's not just a predictor of what is happening in the economy. It's a fact that Nigeria will soon get into the crisis of skill liquidity. We're going to have a skill liquidity crisis. We're going to have an employability crisis. And we're going to have a labor market inclusiveness crisis. And to think that COVID-19 came around with its great decline, this crisis will be done if we do not rise with countries like this, with platforms like this, to begin to address the issues before they land and take root, I think, in our economy.
Yeah, I partially agree with you. You know, I'm of the new normal, and partly I agree with those who want to. In our local parlance, we say "Jakpa." You know, they want to go out there. I think I partly agree with you when you say in the future we are going to have this skills liquidity. And recall that in the new normal, the remote kind of workplace now makes it possible, aside the resultant effect of its impact on productivity, which may stem from performance, which we talked about, of underperformance. Yes, I still think that of migration, because I'm one person that believes that what is popular may not be proper. They may be going out there, but sir, do you think that means that going out there means success? That being there, migrating to other countries, joining their workforce means success, like it used to be then? Don't you think with the great reset now, like you've rightly discussed, happening in the US, and the great decline which we are having now, and which is making people adapt slowly, but eventually they will catch up with it? Don't you think that the young ones, the migrant, the economic migrant that forms a lot of them, should look for a way to restructure or maybe create something? I'm just asking. Don't you think that migration aspect may not be the answer? Okay, seems we just lost our guest again. Okay, sir. So welcome back. I think we'll just do a quick rundown on the because I can't wait to get the answer to this question. How do we position for the great recline? How are managers going to reconcile the other pandemic, which is on the walking in the post-COVID era? I think I can't wait for those answers. I think they'll be tied around their that adaptive strategies which you promised. That's the take for me. I'm impatient.
All right, I'm back. I don't know what happened to the internet from your end and my end, but I was trying to make sure that I have the great reset of the internet to ensure that we get the best of
Okay. You know
our
we'll be
time.
having another at the
So,
second
can we?
session. Yeah, we just have to do a rundown to the strategies you promised. Yeah, because we're having a second session
All right.
in less
I
than
probably
30 minutes.
supposedly what I'll do is also do a run over a voiceover over them and see if
Okay.
may want to have them. So basically, the Great Recline performing pandemic that is going to be the side of human and intellectual capital is going to have great consequences for employees and for workplace psychology as well. And basically, there are two managerial and leadership capabilities must be developed, especially by those at the demand side, of this divide, that they need to be able to optimize staff and firm performance in the workplace. And one of these two very, very popular, is very, very popular. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. And what are these two capabilities? Number one is emotional intelligence, and number two is cultural intelligence. Number one is emotional intelligence, and number two is culture. And I make bold to conclude my session, which has been wonderful to an extent, that for leaders and managers and entrepreneurs to be able to help their staff, help their subordinates, be able to help those that are, being recruited and those that are being retained from the supply side of labor, to be able to also prevent those that are doing everything possible to leave Nigeria for greener pastures. And most of all, is be able to help people equip themselves with adaptive capabilities for adaptive performance in the new workplace, given the COVID-19 pandemic and given the coming underperforming and underworking pandemic. These managers, these leaders, these entrepreneurs, these intrapreneurs, these public sector administrators need to have a very high level of emotional intelligence, development of those capabilities, and also cultural intelligence capabilities needed, especially the culture. The culture has changed from the paradigm we have exposed now, from the paradigm we need to integrate now. So the real thing here is the culture is going to change. The culture of work is changing. So, and for you to be able to, ensure that people continue to give that adaptive performance and, spike their adaptive capabilities, you must focus on cultural intelligence. And cultural intelligence will actually help people to adapt to the new normal, to adapt to the new workplace realities, and to give back their confidence, gain back their confidence, and give back their commitment to work, and to make the work of coordination easy and for their supervisors at work. These are two things that everybody, either at the supply side or the demand side, should start reading on, should start going for training on. Go online, there are 1,000,001 courses on emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, EQ, and cultural intelligence, CQ. Attempt these courses, some of them are free. Buy the books, read the books, and that way we can all prepare ourselves for the great collaboration that we actually need to put the negative spillover effects of COVID-19 to rest and make sure that it doesn't have a bad impact on organizations and collectively on our economy. Thank you very much for this privilege and for your time.
Wow. So, and to guests out there, I would like to let everyone know that Dr. Kenneth Ikenwa has proven expertise in every word he mentioned tonight. It's indisputable from the beginning of the session till now. Notwithstanding the challenges, this is to tell you the power of Nigeria, the power of what is in us, greater than, bigger than whatever is around us. The session tonight has, told us that we're in the great reset. Even the network has resigned itself to that. But we will not give up. We won't be shut down by those prevailing realities. The truth is this: even if we go out there, you've been there as well, you still have challenges peculiar to those places. We can't deny that fact. And we have to still adapt to them. We can't say, that we are all 100% ready when we are there. When it comes, depending on where we are, we still have to, work to adapt to it. We talked about cultural,
as well as developing adaptive capabilities.
Yes. Cultural intelligence. Now, cultural intelligence, I think I would also let our viewers know that our guest tonight is one authority I can refer to anytime till the world comes to an end, that can help you create a new organizational culture post-COVID era. Yes, if you need help in that aspect, I think I should be the John the Baptist tonight, pointing towards where Dr. Ken is. And with the remote kind of work, he can help you from anywhere you are in the globe. So do not miss that out. We may not look that so glamorous. We are not the next shiny object. We are not hip, but I think a lot of the problems we are looking for solutions out there, where we pay arm and leg to get, a lot of those problems have been solved tonight with this session. And for further guidance on that, I think we have to do an encore on this session. So I hope you agree on that. Are you with me on that?
I'm with you anytime, any day. I'm available.
Namaste, sir. Namaste. So we've had series of sessions on emotional intelligence. In fact, during the lockdown, we had to tilt it to the family, emotional intelligence in the family, emotional intelligence in business, emotional intelligence even to startups. So whoever has been a member of the open house 2020 till date, I think you have to go back. If you've forgotten, send you the recording. It's also going to be live on our website, www.theopenhousegroup.org.ng. So you check us out at the openhousegroup.org.ng to get our previous recordings on emotional intelligence. So I also have to add as well that the fact that change is one phenomenon that comes and it doesn't come fully. Those who are early adapters are those who may have had the wisdom of foresight into the future per se. And these are the ones who have exposed their minds, who have expanded their horizon. These are not the regular everyday people. So I would like to ask you, don't you think our culture that de-emphasizes this rising hip-hop culture that de-emphasizes learning, that demonizes school, like the cliche school na scam, don't you think it's part of our problems? It's part of a problem of a great number of our youth that now think, okay, going to the other side where we think is greener the solutions. So don't you think that's part of our problem? This is the knowledge economy, but a lot of the young ones are not driven by that.
Well, I want to disagree with you on the position that is part of our problem. I think it's just one of the symptoms of a problem that is already existing. It's just one of the outbreaks of a problem that is already innate in our society and in our culture. And everybody talks about data these days. So, I mean, as a business scientist, I can't run away from the importance of data. And when you take a look at the data, what does the data say? The data says that about 55 to 60% of Nigerians are living under $2 a day. The data also says that another 40 to 45% of Nigerians are illiterate.
Wow.
So if
can I get this cost, that data?
Yeah, you can get all of this data from the World Economic Forum and from the different United Nations websites. So you have to compare you have to correlate the percentage of education of the literate and the non-literate with the percentage of poverty in our society. And you see, economic poverty is the root of all other sources of poverty, whether it is spiritual poverty, whether it is psychological poverty, whether it is mental poverty, whether it is even cultural poverty. Our culture is dying. Our culture is dying. Our culture is being substituted, with diffusion from foreign culture, as it were. And where the culture of a people die, the chances of development will be greatly reduced. The chances of moving to the next stage of development will greatly reduce. If you see the little we've been able to achieve in this country has not been too far from some 20 years ago. And then look at 20 years ago down the line, look at the kind of culture that we're having now, especially with the advent of democracy. Okay? So most of the things that we are enjoying in Nigeria, most of these things were already there. They were already built, even before the advent of this nascent democracy. And so democracy has come, and there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of expression, there's freedom to live anyhow, there's freedom to even die anyhow. So what do you expect? So you correlate the poverty rate with the illiteracy rate, and you will understand why our culture is in jeopardy. And then illiteracy is one problem. Mal-literacy is another problem. Mal-education is another problem. So you have those who claim to be graduates, you have those who claim to be this and that, I've gone to school, I've been to school, and then they can't even write they can't write an application letter. And they are graduates. They've gone through the NYC program, gone through the 4 walls of university, and spent 4 years. These are the people that will find themselves. These are the people that will find themselves tomorrow elected to the Senate, elected to the House of Reps, elected to the State House of Reps, and claim to be making laws for the economic viability and prosperity of 200 million people. How do we quo vadis? Quo vadis.
How do we?
Where are we going
How do?
Yeah. How do we go?
Yeah. Wow. I would like to take you up on that.
Where are we going? All right.
I would like to pick you up on that.
You find that we are in a society where those that are properly educated, there was I don't know if it was a social media meme or what, I don't know what it's called, where a big company in Nigeria, I don't castigate names, I don't do, I'm too professional to do that. Right? A big company in Nigeria into a big conglomerate in Nigeria advertised for drivers, advertised for people to come and drive trucks, and said one of the qualifications, if you have a PhD, come and drive. What an insult! If you
we will trash that out on your second coming at the open house. This is so interesting. I feel like a rebirth is happening to me tonight. Yes, I haven't had this in a long time. So viewers,
these are contradictions. These are some of the contradictions I talk about.
Yeah. I don't agree less. If there's anything I've learned tonight, I've learned the difference between lockdown and shutdown. So viewers, change is the major constant, and it comes when you least expected it. Yes, people have proposed before that the world was due for a reset as far back as 2017. But here we are. The COVID-19 workplace challenges that we have to deal with are staring us head on, and there is nothing we can do that will be as bad as just sitting down, folding our arms, or running off somewhere else. Those problems will sit there staring at us in the face. And our guest tonight has also, given us a lot of insight into what the new workplace. He has done big, big justice to the new normal workplace. Yes, it was based on reality check, though. Yes, he can't fail. Dr. Ikenwa cannot fail. So I don't know why my tongue is trying to fail me now, but I know the reason. I know the reason. So his delivery tonight was based on proactive, adaptive strategies. Yes, that we can use to scale these times. He mentioned terminologies like the Great Reset, which he said is happening currently, not just in the US, but in other countries of the world. Great resignation, great restructuring from having brick and mortar organizations to virtual organizations, and the great recline, which is here with us, sitting side by side. It's been experienced basically primarily on the supply side of labor, especially for the managers, HR managers, business managers, entrepreneurs, and intrapreneurs, business owners, and prospective business owners. So, how do we position for the great recline? Let me just do it the way he did it. Sir, thank you very much for tonight. As we wrap up, viewers, if there is any other thing you did today aside coming to this session serves as a crown for me and for every other person. I can speak for a whole lot of persons at the open house. Everything you did today was part of your work culture. Everything you did yesterday, pre-COVID, was part of your work culture. Post-COVID, it has to change. Your work culture has to change. You have to work on it. Your emotional intelligence has to get the upskill. It has to grow. It has to change. Your clients can call you from anywhere. Your workforce, your staff, they are no longer the former ones you used to have. There is this psychological effect which COVID brought. We have to adapt. Thank you very much. In a short while, we'll be bringing our second guest, Uka Francis, who will be giving us his own take on how to reset our brands, our images for the new normal. Thank you very much, Dr. Ken.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Basil, for having me on. You have a great night. Yeah. Bye-bye.